Please, Sheikh. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah. Salatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah. Wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallama tasliman kathiran. Amma ba'd. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. So we have the ill effects of idle speech and or music upon the soul. The ill effects of ill speech and or music upon the soul. Very interesting topic, and to be quite frank, extremely important topic. Now, there are different ways that we can discuss this and talk about it, approach it, and attempt to tackle it, but definitely not in 40 minutes, and definitely not in 45 minutes, and definitely not with such a mixed and diverse audience. There are those who speak Arabic, those who don't, those who understand Arabic, those who do not, those who have studied formally, and those who have not. There may be some from among us who lean towards the permissibility of listening to music and the permissibility of saying and doing certain things. And there are those who are the exact opposite and have a stark and staunch position saying no. So to give this topic its due right, it can't be done in 40 minutes or 45 minutes, especially by someone like myself. But what we're going to talk about, inshallah ta'ala, and we're going to discuss, and we're going to focus on, is the concept of effects. Halal, haram, what can you do, what can you do? But the power, and the impact, and the effect of speech and of music. And the things that follow in tow or in line after those two. Tight. So obviously, idle speech is a thing, and music is a thing. From the things that pertain to music and its effect and its negative, adverse impact on the soul, on the body, on the mind, etc., are the following issues. Number one, dancing. Number two, singing. And then comes instruments or musical instruments. Fourthly is idle speech, void speech. Fifthly, or before that, is bad speech, obscene speech, impermissible speech, and unbefitting speech. So we have these 5 things that can come together. And then we have some of these 5 things which could be totally separated and split apart. So an example of this is that there could be music without singing. And there could be singing without music. There could be music with singing with impermissible speech. There could be music with singing with impermissible speech with idle speech. And there could be music with singing with impermissible speech with idle speech and dancing. Or it could just be dancing and music, dancing and singing, or it could be singing without idle speech, or singing with impermissible speech, give or take, like Legos. You take an arm from here, a head from there, you put it there, you can mix and you can match. But there's one thing that we can all agree upon, is that there is a time, rather oftentimes, rather one may say in most cases, all 5 are going to be together. But la yalzam, not necessarily. Not necessarily. And if you make that argument, you're going to leave room for someone to come and say, well, what about this and what about that? All right? So that's first and foremost. Another very important point here is that what I want to focus on is our youth. The young brothers and the young sisters. Of course, music, singing and dancing, idle speech is a problem for everyone. It's an issue for everyone, those who are old and those who are young. But what I want to focus on is the youth, the young people. And to be quite frank, what type of music is my teenage son or teenage daughter listening to? For the argument, is my son listening to Beethoven or Mozart? Is he listening to some type of classical jazz? Is he listening to something meaningful? A song about struggle, about oppression, about growing up in the United States in the 20s and the 30s? Or is my son listening to this rapper, to this metal artist, to this pop artist, to this dancing artist, to this R&B artist, etc.? Let's keep it real and let's be honest. Because there's an argument that someone can come and someone can make, and they can say this music here has no idle speech in it. This music here does not bring about any type of infatuation or obsession. It doesn't talk about obscenities. It's not talking about anything which is unbefitting. It's not talking about anything sexual. It's not talking about drugs or violence. It's not talking about shirk and kufr and loving other than Allah. It's just music that soothes, that calms, that relaxes, that allows you and helps you to focus and concentrate, etc. Someone could make that argument. Is that a valid argument? Is it permissible? It's not what I want to mention right now. But I don't think that my 17-year-old son or my 20-year-old son in college is listening to that type of music. I don't think that when my daughter or my son, when they go to play basketball and they go to the gym, they're working out to that type of music. I don't think they have the intention of, let me soothe myself and concentrate and focus, and let me enjoy this classic symphony, this melody. Let me enjoy this smooth, calm jazz. But in most cases, Allahu Alam, 9 out of 10 times, your 18-year-old son, your 23-year-old daughter that does listen to music and so on and so forth is going to be something what? Something else. That's very important. And I think أنا أرى هذا من أهم الضوابط والنقاط لمن يخوض مضمار هذا يعني هذه المسألة مسألة الأغاني والموسيقى والمعازف والرقص والأصوات. All right, to be real and to be honest, and for the fiqh and the discussion of fiqh أن يكون موضوعيا واقعيا. It has to be realistic. It has to be current, and it cannot be just based off of pure theory. And that is because, once more, somebody, and there are people who have said this, he says that my raps are halal raps. I'm not talking about women. I don't have no dancers. I have no rented jewelry. I'm not talking about materialism, Bentleys, shooting people, none of that stuff. So therefore, my music, my singing is not lahul hadith. It isn't idle talk, a person says. Or it may be lahul hadith, which will explain what that is, but it isn't fuhsh. It's not obscene. It's not something which is degrading and disrespecting people. So therefore, it's mubah and it's permissible. But how many people are listening to that? For argument's sake. For argument's sake. And if they do listen to the halal music, quote unquote, I'm not saying music is halal, I said for argument's sake, what does it lead to? And these are things that we discussed last night. And this has to be taken into consideration when you discuss any modern day fiqh issue, what it leads to. What it leads to, not now, not today, but tomorrow. All right? Moving forward, another thing that I wish to discuss is the power of music. How strong it is and how powerful it is, good or bad, positive or negative. And this is extremely important in this discussion, and that is because when you have a thing which has so much power, so much force, so much weight, you have to be extremely careful in dealing with it. Extremely careful. And that is because it's like carrying something which is extremely delicate. One false move, one stumble, one stomp, boom, falls on the ground and it shatters. And you no longer have control of that thing. So music, for argument's sake, a person says it's permissible, there's nothing wrong with it, so on and so forth. But are we looking at the strength and the power of this thing? And can it be used? Can it be given to anyone irresponsibly? Go ahead, listen to whatever you want to, as long as it's not obscene, as long as it's not idle talk, etc. Is music such a simple, easy thing that you can just play around with? Something that's been around for Allahu Alam how long, experts say. And something that has a great part of our daily lives. Sports, the news, the weather, your phone ringtones, and the list goes on. Music is extremely powerful. And if it's extremely powerful, would shaitan neglect it and ignore it? If it's that powerful, would the people who wish to ruin Islam and the Muslims, would they neglect it and would they ignore it? Would they leave it just in the hands of the good, pious people? Or would they dominate it and control it and manipulate it and give it to the people in the way in which they see fit? It's a serious question that we must ask ourselves. From those statements, I'm going to mention some classical text here from some of the scholars of Islam regarding the power of music. The power of music. And once more, brothers and sisters, please be patient with me. Right now, I'm not here to stand in front of you and to speak on and to discuss the ruling of music or the ruling of singing or the ruling of dancing, because that's not the topic. But it says the effects. And from the effects of a thing, or the effects that come from the power of the thing. the effect of the Arabic language upon this, the effect of Islam upon the Arabic language, the effect of this cultural norm with regards to those who live in this city. Good, bad, right, wrong, but the power of it and the effect of it. Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah ta'ala, and we know that Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah was one of the most famous and one of the most infamous scholars of Islam. Like him or love him, hate him or love him, doesn't matter. But he was one of, if not the most famous and infamous scholars of Islam. And one thing that his enemies and friends all agreed upon is that kana min awsa' an-nas ittila'an. He was from the most well-versed and well-read of the people, whether you agree with him or not. وَكَانَ مِنْ أَعْلَمِ النَّاسِ بِالْحَلَالِ وَالْحَرَامِ وَالْخِلَافِ وَالْإِجْمَاعِ. And he was from the most learned of the people, of that which the scholars of Islam agreed on and differed on, whether you took his view or not. Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah, he has so much confidence in his knowledge. كَانَ يَعْتَزُّ بِعِلْمِهِ. He has so much confidence in the ilm that he had, is that when he debated and when he argued in front of the rulers, they were oftentimes influenced by his opponents. Okay, so let's talk about the issue of visiting the graves. Ziyaratul Qubur. تجوز أم لا تجوز؟ الاستغاثة بالأموات، الاستغاثة بالنبي صلى الله عليه وسلم، تجوز أم لا تجوز؟ Alright? الحلف بغير الله، تجوز أم لا تجوز؟ تأويل الصفات إلى آخره. Any issue that he was discussing in front of the rulers, and the rulers oftentimes were influenced by his khasam, his opponents, whatever their orientation was. He would stand in front of the ruler, and he would give the ruler an ultimatum. He would say to the ruler, Amir al-Mu'mineen, he would say, listen, I'll make a challenge. Those who say that I'm wrong about visiting the graves, swearing by the law, affirming Allah's attributes or interpreting them, etc., he says, let's make a challenge. And he says, I can bet you, and I can promise you, that these people here, whatever they're claiming and quoting, Shafi'i, Hanafi, whatever they're saying, that I know their school of thought more than they do. He made this challenge. كُلُّ مَنْ خَالَفَنِي فَأَنَا أَعْلَمُ بِمَذْهَبِهِ مِنْهُ. He said that I can tell you more about their madhabs than they know. And I'm not Shafi'i or Hanafi or Maliki or this or that. Everyone understand this? So just think to make this statement now. To make this statement. So if I go into your kitchen, right? And you have a style of cooking. And I feel that style of cooking is erroneous. It's messed up. You can't cook like that. That's not how you cook. That's not how you prepare the food. You say, well, I studied in France. I studied under this grand master chef, etc. So on and so forth. And this is how we do things in France. And I say, well, I studied in Germany. And we do things totally different. And I say, all right, let's make a bet. Let's make a challenge. I can guarantee you that I can tell you more about France and its long, rich history of culinary arts more than you can. For me to make that claim and to make that statement, whether I'm right or wrong, that has to prove a great deal of what? No doubt about that. And a great deal of reading and being versed in my opponent's madhab, let alone that which I believe. Everyone understand this? He says, rahimahullah ta'ala, regarding the effect and the power of music. He says, وَالْمَعَازِفُ هِيَ خَمْرُ النُّفُوسِ تفعل بالنفوس أعظم مما تفعل حمي الكؤوس فإذا سكروا بالأصوات حل فيهم الشرك ومالوا إلى الفواحش وإلى الظلم فيشركون ويقتلون النفس التي حرم الله ويزنون وهذه الثلاثة موجودة كثيرا في أهل السماع أو في أهل السماع المعازف. Listen to these words. He says والمعازف هي خمر النفوس. He says musical instruments, music is soul wine. Khamrun nufus, it's the wine of the soul. If the soul had the ability to drink something and to become drunk and intoxicated, tipsy, messed up, tore up, whatever you want to say, if the soul had the ability to take a cup and take it in, he says if there was anything, not zina, not this, it would be what? It would be ma'azif, it would be musical instruments. He then says, rahimahullah ta'ala, تفعل بالنفوس أعظم مما تفعل حمي الكؤوس. He says musical instruments, they are stronger and they are more powerful than actual wine glasses or cups. Stronger. And each of us here, we all know the effect and the power of wine and of alcohol. and how wine and alcohol is an integral part of society. East and West is mentioned in the Quran. And a major part of Arab society was getting drunk. And that's why Allah Azza wa Jal, He didn't abolish the permissibility of drinking alcohol in one step, but it came down in 4 progressive steps. Because Allah knew that the Arabs wouldn't just leave it alone immediately. They couldn't coat Turkey, it was too much. And if you ever go overseas, or you go to Turkey, or you go to any land in which there's a great deal of Muslims, and there's a great deal of influence of Arabic and Middle Eastern culture, you know one thing for sure, and that is coffee and tea. Coffee and tea. The time you land in the airport, they're handing you a cup of coffee. You sit down for a business meeting to ask for a woman's hand in marriage. Anything that you do, there's going to be a cup of coffee and a cup of tea. My mother died, I have to go home. Ya Sheikh, I need to go home. In the Islamic University of Medina, you go into the president's office, the Mudir's office. Ya Sheikh, I need to go back home to America. He says, Ijlis. Take some tea, take some coffee. Ya Sheikh, I need you to write me a letter so I can go home to go to my grandmother's funeral. And he says, that's fine, but after the coffee or the tea, right? This is reality, we all know this. And we know that tea and coffee is like white on rice when it comes to this type of culture. Why and how? Do we know that the Arabic word for coffee, qahwa, originally comes from Turkish? Kahva. And this original word is one of the ancient terminologies for khamr. Khamr that was celebrated, khamr that was romanticized in ancient Arabic poetry. They loved it so much. So it isn't an accident, or it isn't a strange fact, why the thing that replaced khamr and took its cultural status has the same name. And that's because they have to have some type of drink. When we sit, when we talk, when we laugh, when we cry. Just think about that now. So he says that musical instruments is the soul's wine. It's the wine of the soul. And he says, and it does to the soul and with the soul much worse than that which the cup does. And we all know the effect of what? Of alcohol. Even if you're not a Muslim, your cousin was killed in a car accident because he was drinking. Or your cousin was hit by someone that was drinking. Or, unfortunately, you grew up and you saw your mother being abused and beaten to a pulp because of what? Alcohol. Your father came home, he was drunk. He loved your mother, he loved you, but he was so drunk, so mad, so frustrated, he beat up his wife, he beat up your mother. So, when we have to talk about Islam and Muslims, but we're talking about the effect of alcohol. The United States of America. Do we need to talk about the Prohibition era, the famous gangsters, the famous Prohibition agents, and how much blood was shed just for repeal or prohibition of alcohol? When you have a baby, what do? How do you celebrate? You win the NBA Finals. What do? We do what? Going to the club, the first thing you do is what? We buy out the bar, they say. Give me 100 bottles of Cristal. There's no more. Give them. Everyone has one bottle, like a cup of water. This is an integral part of the culture, drinking. Every funeral, wedding, anything that you do, alcohol is connected. And what happens when people get drunk? What happens to their bodies? What happens to their minds? What happens to their tongues? And what happens to the people that are innocent that don't drink? Such as the poor old lady that was driving the car, her hands like this, her seatbelt is on, she's going 40 miles per hour with full precaution, and then a drunk person comes making a text message, boom, and he kills her. What was her crime? What was her sin? She didn't do anything wrong, but she's a victim of the consumption of alcohol. Shaykh Islam ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah ta'ala, he says, فَإِذَا سَكِرُوا بِالْأَصْوَاتِ حَلَّ فِيهِمُ الشِّرْكِ. He says, so when they become drunk by the voices, shirk falls upon them. Shirk falls upon them. وَمَالُوا إِلَى الْفَوَاحِشِ. And then they go to the obscenities. They go to the ignoble acts of statement, rape, murder, sexual abuse, pedophilia. And the list goes on when the people become drunk from what they hear. He says, وَإِلَى الظُّلْمِ. And wrongdoing and oppression. How many families were broken up because of gambling addiction? First it started with my watch. Then it started with my wife's ring. Then it started with the house and this and that. And the next thing you know, everything is going and squandered because of a gambling addiction. How many people were shot and killed in a dice game, playing craps or CeeLo? How many people were robbed? How much hatred and malice came from gambling, came from dhulm, wrongdoing, when people are drunk and they're not in their normal state. He says, فَيُشْرِكُونَ, and then they fall into shirk. After the shirk fell upon them, then they actually fall into it. Shaykh Islam, he says, وَيَقْتُلُونَ النَّفْسَ الَّتِي حَرَّمَ اللَّهُ, and they kill the soul that Allah has made unlawful. وَيَزْنُونَ, and they fornicate. They commit fornication, they commit adultery. وَهَذِهِ الثَّلَاثَةُ مَوْجُودَةٌ كَثِيرًا فِي أَهْلِ السَّمَاءِ الْمَعَازِفِ. And he says, with all fairness and justice, he says these three vices, shirk, dhulm, and zina, he says, مَوْجُودَةٌ كَثِيرًا. He didn't say all of them, كَثِيرًا. He says it's very prevalent among people who listen to these instruments. Now, once more, brothers and sisters, we're not talking about calm, peaceful jazz. We're not talking about some type of soothing meditation music. We're talking about the stuff that your son is watching on his phone. We're talking about the stuff that your daughter is listening to and downloading on her tablet or on her laptop. Every 5 seconds, every 2 lines is B-I-T-C-H, is S-U-C-K, my D-I-C-K, it is H-O-E, it is I'm killing, I'm shooting, I'm robbing, I'm having. In most cases. Of course, there are people that don't talk about these things, as we have stated. There are people who don't have these negative lyrics, as we have what? As we have stated. But what is Abdurrahman and Fatima and Salima and Abdullah, what are they listening to? In most cases. When they go to college with their non-Muslim friends, what do you think they're listening to? Mozart, Beethoven, John Coltrane? Of course, we know in most cases, 9 out of 10 times, they're talking about these things. Now pay attention. It says, حَلَّ فِيهِمُ الشِّرْك. Shirk comes upon them. It doesn't mean that the song is going to say we worship idols. It doesn't mean that the song is going to say we worship the sun and we prostrate to other than Allah. It doesn't mean that. But the worship of other things as well. And from that is the worship of materialism. The worship of dunya, the worship of money, the worship of one's sexual desires, and the worship of the power and the force and the authority that a gun gives you. And we don't have to mention any examples and quotes. I'm sure you guys know more than I do. That these people, they're singing about and they're talking about their hearts being connected and tied to other than Allah. And that is the core kernel of shirk. وَمِنَ النَّاسِ مَنْ يَتَّخِذُ مِنْ دُونِ اللَّهِ أَنْدَادًا ماذا يفعلون بهذه الأنداد يحبونهم كحب الله والذين آمنوا أشد حبا لله ولو يرى الذين ظلموا الآيات. Allah says, and from men are those who take besides Allah partners, rivals. What do they do with these partners and their rivals? They offer them service, and Allah says, yuhibbunahum, they love them. That was the first thing mentioned. The first thing mentioned. So ibadah and worship doesn't just mean prostrated and falling down in front of an idol or a totem pole. It's deeper than that. And even in the pop culture, in movies, and unfortunately all other types of obscene and filthy things, they call a thing worship. They call it this type of worship and that type of worship. And watch this man or this woman worship this part of this person's body. So just stop and think about shirk and how shaitan plays games with the son of Adam. That's with alcohol that you drink. According to Shaykh Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, he says it's also the alcohol that goes into your eardrums and your earlobes. And that's the music that gets you to act crazy, to behave crazy, to talk crazy. How many of us lost our sons, our daughters through gun violence because of a song? Your son, he wanted to be tough, he wanted to be hard, he wanted to be in the streets because of a rapper who's an actor and an imposter. There's no gangster that's going to get on an album and a record and talk about the people that he killed. It doesn't exist. There's no one that's going to make an album that's going to be spread across the world and say, I did this and I did that. There's no drug kingpin that talks about the drugs that he's selling. What I did years ago, maybe. But I'm involved in this illegal trade right now. And selling 1 million records, that doesn't happen. So your poor son, he lost his life. Now maybe in this part of New Jersey, it may not be that prevalent. But in other parts of New Jersey, and where I come from, Philadelphia, I can mention the different family members that I all lost through gun violence. 14, 16, 32, this age, that age. And a big part of it was because of what they heard. He says, يَقْتُلُونَ النَّفْسَ الَّتِي حَرَّمَ اللَّهُ. He stole this from me. He challenged me. He said this. Boom. Just like that. In most cases, when you talk to people that fall into these things, they will connect it to a rapper or someone that they heard or someone that they spoke on. Now let's discuss something else now. We don't want to go into the racial issue and that of color and tribes and ethnicity, but it is a reality. And that is many people, they only focus upon urban music to be bad and to be negative. But heavy metal, rock, and all of these other things, they're fine. But if you look at the amount of shirk that is involved with those rock stars and the groupies and the people that offer themselves like slaughtered animals at an altar, you find it 10 times worse than rap and other genres. So the important thing is any type of listening that includes, first and foremost, shirk. And shirk doesn't just mean worshiping idols. It doesn't just mean that. Number 2, yaqtulun, killing, murder. And 3, zina. Then you automatically know how to deal with it. So regardless of getting into the music or in its ruling, we can clearly see from this statement and from our experience, the what? The power of what? Of music. And if a thing is that powerful, it is dangerous. And if it's dangerous, then it has to be handled with care, caution, and responsibility. Everyone understand? It's moving forward. The pupil of Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah, Ibn Qayyim, he says, وَالَّذِي شَاهَدْنَاهُ نَحْنُ وَغَيْرُنَا وَعَرَفْنَاهُ بِالتَّجَارُبِ أنه ما ظهرت المعازف وآلات اللهو في قوم وفشت فيهم واشتغلوا بها إلا سلط الله عليهم العدو وبلوا بالقحط والجدب وولاة السوء والعاقل يتأمل أحوال العالم وينظر والله المستعان. Ibn Qayyim, he said, that which we have seen and that which others have seen and that which we know for sure from experience is that whenever there are musical instruments and these types of amusement, things that people listen to and enjoy, فَشَتْ فِيهِمْ وَاشْتَغَلُوا بِهَا. Listen carefully. It becomes widespread. وَاشْتَغَلُوا بِهَا. And they busy themselves with this singing and dancing. And this is extremely of it. And we talk about alcohol. It's not just what? One cup. It's not just one glass. It's not just give me a shot. But then there's a what? A second glass. And there's a third glass and a fourth. And before you know it, you're drunk. And before you know it, you're saying obscenities, shirk, kufr, murder, and zina. And to stop and think about, you listen to one song. You go on YouTube and then there's a thumbnail, there's another, then a fourth, and a fifth. I'm down, I'm sad, I'm depressed. I need to hear this one song to make me feel better. And that's a huge problem. I need to listen to one thing to lift me up in the morning. And the next thing you know, you listen to 10 songs. And the next thing you know, you downloaded 5 or 6 albums. Click, 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 click. Face. Is this not the case? Stop and think about this. He says, وَاشْتَغَلُوا بِهَا. And then they become busy with it. And then I wake up, I need it. I go to sleep, I need it. I go running, I need it. I go to the gym, I need it. I'm sad, I'm down, I'm depressed, and I what? And I need it. He says, what happens when people do this? He says, whenever this happens, Allah Azza wa Jal sends their enemies upon them. And they're afflicted with drought and lack of growth from the earth and evil leaders, wulat su, tyrants, wrongdoers who are their governments. He says, وَالْعَاقِلُ يَتَأَمَّلُ أَحْوَالَ الْعَالَمِ. And this is golden speech, this last part here. He says the intellectual person, the smart one, not even intellectual, because that's not even the best translation. Aqil, one who has basic smarts, يَتَأَمَّلُ أَحْوَالَ الْعَالَمِ, is the one who looks at the world and thinks and reflects. Look what happened here in this country. Look what happened in that country. Look what happened in my country. Why am I in the United States this day? Except because of this evil ruler, this corrupt government, because of these prices, because of this tyrannical regime. وَالْعَاقِلُ يَتَأَمَّلُ أَحْوَالَ الْعَالَمِ. He says the smart one is he who looks and sees in the world and takes a lesson. وَاللَّهُ الْمُسْتَعَانِ. And with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, all help is sought. Now let's go forward here with some of these slides. These were prepared by some of my students. Alhamdulillah, may Allah reward them well. Let's see what they have to say, inshallah. First slide says, definition of lahul hadith, idle speech. What's meant by that? First, it says linguistically means amusement, distraction, something that fully engrosses a person to the point of, it says he or she forgets everything else. Allahu. And before we go forward, there's another word that's very important, which is allahu, with a ghain. We have lahu and we have laghu. Many of the pious predecessors, they would say, inna laghwa al-kalamu alladhi la fa'idata fihi. They say that laghu is the speech which has no real benefit. It doesn't necessarily have to be haram. It doesn't mean it's a curse word. It doesn't mean you're calling a woman of this and a man of that. But a speech which is void of serious beneficial content. Atif, I need you to do me a favor. What's the rule on copyright infringement? Last night, Akhi, you're taking pictures of my stuff. This belongs to my students. I don't think they'll be happy, huh? Tell you, moving forward, they say that lahu is that which is a means of play and amusement, and it gets your mind to be numbed and nulled from anything else. And then it says al-hadith linguistically means a form of speech, etc. Lahu al-hadith is all things that divert a person from the religion of Allah and the truth. This includes gossiping, talking about useless matters, backbiting, and etc. The great Tabi Hasan al-Basri, may Allah have mercy upon him, said regards to lahu al-hadith, it is everything that makes you heedless of Allah and His remembrance. We can see from this definition is that there are many things that we do on a daily basis which all fall under the broad umbrella of idle speech. So be careful. Point number 2 is that this is going to be subjective. Saying hello to someone, how are you doing? Did you see the game last night? You talk to your co-worker, you make some kind speech to someone. Could it be considered what? Lahul hadith. But it doesn't necessarily mean that it's haram. And it doesn't necessarily mean that all of it is something that you have to stay away from. But to the point in which it distracts you, preoccupies you, and turns you away from the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, let's ask ourselves a serious question. Before we get into the concept of the music, is it permissible, is it not permissible? One of the questions last night was, how do I make qiyam al-layl? Go to sleep, go to work, spend time with my wife, play with my little boy, play with my little girl, go to the masjid, study, etc. How do I balance out of 24 hours all of these things? How do I pray a third of the night or half of the night? How do I make Isha, go to sleep, wake up, get up for Fajr to the masjid, and go to work with energy? How is that possible? This was one of the questions last night, correct? And the Imam, he said, focus on the dhikr of Allah, and perhaps Allah will put the barakah in the rest of your endeavors. Stay with me now. There are many statements, many athar, that the Sahaba and their followers, they would stand at nighttime and they would recite half the Quran, or a third of the Quran, or one rak'ah Baqarah, one rak'ah Ali Imran. Or they would pray so much, this would happen to their feet, and then they would go to sleep for only a few hours of that. They would wake up, eat suhoor, fast, they would go out fight in Allah's cause, they would seek in, they would make hajj, etc. Some of these statements, they seem so absurd, as he mentioned, that a person may say it can't be true. هذه الآثار إنما وردت عن سبيل المبالغة ولا مش ممكن في ليلة واحدة تقوم تتسحر تصلي تجاهد تسافر كيف 24 ساعة. How can 24 hours give you the time to do that? This is a serious problem that many people have. Let's ask ourselves the question, how many hours are you listening to the Quran and its recitation? Do you have enough time to dip and dab into this type of music and that type of music? With the complaints that you make that it's not enough time to study. And it's not enough time to read the whole Quran. And my wife is complaining, saying, you don't spend enough time with me. You don't spend enough time in the house. A man goes to the masjid and she says, why are you always at the masjid with the brothers? Why are you always traveling with Fulan? Why are you always there? Why are you always there? So a person who's living a real life, working, studying, taking care of a family, you know how tight 24 hours is. Do you have the extra time to be devoted to Allah's words, your family, your health, this and that, and listen to music? This is a serious question. Also, idle speech. This is something that you must take into consideration. Is there enough space in your pie chart? Are you listening to the Quran enough? Whether the music is halal or haram. But are you even giving the priorities their necessary amount of time and attention? Moving forward, verses that prove music is included within lahu al-hadith. They say is that there is a connection between the two, idle speech and music. And we have previously explained, قَدْ يَجْتَمِعَانِ وَقَدْ لَا يَجْتَمِعَانِ. Sometimes music and idle speech are connected, and other times what? They aren't connected, like an instrumental, in which you're just listening to the beat. There's no lahu al-hadith. All right, there's no actual speech or talking, but there's music, or there's music with the idle speech. Everyone understand this? And it's extremely important to understand what to put together and what to what? Separate. And if not, you're going to fall into a mistake in saying or deducing a ruling. Moving forward, these sisters, they say, قال الله تعالى في سورة لقمان ومن الناس من يشتري له الحديث ليضل عن سبيل الله بغير علم ويتخذها هزوا أولئك لهم عذاب مهين. Allah says, and of people is he who buys the amusement of speech to mislead others from the way of Allah without knowledge, and who takes it in ridicule. Those will have a humiliating punishment. Tafsir of the verse. قال ابن جرير حدثني يونس بن عبد الأعلى قال أخبرنا ابن وهب قال أخبرني يزيد بن يونس عن أبي صخر عن أبي معاوية البجلي عن سعيد بن جبير عن أبي الصهباء البكري أنه سمع عبد الله بن مسعود وهو يسأل عن هذه الآية ومن الناس من يشتري له الحديث ليضل عن سبيل الله فقال عبد الله الغناء والله الذي لا إله إلا هو يرددها 3 مرات. Ibn Jarir said, Yunus ibn Abdullah told me, Ibn Wahb told us, Yazid ibn Yunus told me about the father of Sakhar from Abu Muawiyah al-Bajli, from Sa'id ibn Jubair, from the father of As-Sahba al-Bakri, that he heard Abdullah ibn Mas'ud being asked about this ayah. He responded thrice, empathetically, by God. It means singing/music. Ibn Jarir al-Tabari in his Jami' al-Bayan mentions that he interprets that the interpreters of the Quran differed as to the meaning of the term lahu al-hadith, idle talk, which occurs in the above quoted verse. Their views regarding the meaning can be formulated into 3 basic categories. Number 1, the first category defines the term lahu al-hadith, singing and listening to songs. Number 2, the purchasing of male or female singers. C, the purchase of instruments of amusement. Now, pay close attention, guys. It's Ibn Jarir. It's not Ibn Taymiyyah or Ibn Qayyim or Ibn Abdul Wahhab. And we all know Ibn Jarir, he died hundreds of years before any of those scholars. So music being permissible, the harms, the effects, etc., has nothing to do with something that Ibn Taymiyyah or Ibn Qayyim brought. And many people, they have this negative notion. Everyone understand this? Music, singing, and the things that are accompanied thereby is going to be one of 3 issues, one of 3 categories. Number 1, impermissible bil ijma'. It's haram according to the consensus of the scholars. Number 2, impermissible بقول الأكثر من أهل العلم الجماهير من السلف والخلف. It's haram according to the vast, overwhelming majority of scholars of past and the later generations. Number 3, it's going to be a mahal of ijtihad, regardless of who said it. But whether you take this or that, you can't make it an issue that Ibn Taymiyyah brought. And you can't just say it's an issue if a young man says, music's haram, ya akhi, you can't listen to it. Cut that off, you can't listen to that. You can't listen to this. You can't say, oh, you're extreme. Everyone understand this? Oh, you're harsh. Anta mutashaddid. You can't say that. You're a Wahhabi this. No, don't say that. And that's because there were scholars hundreds of years before Ibn Abdul Wahhab, and this scholar and that scholar, who clearly said that it's what? Impermissible, unlawful, causes hypocrisy, etc. And this is something, هذا شيء نعاني منه وهو عدم الإنصاف في العلم. People are not fair and they're not just. When someone imposes them in an issue, they label them with a term. You're harsh, you're ignorant, you're young. You don't have any ijazah like I have any ijazah. You never studied like I studied. I have a PhD, I have a master's, I have this. You don't. So therefore, you don't understand these things. What if this young Muslim is quoting from Ibn Jarir and Ibn Mas'ud and Hassan al-Basri? You may not agree, but it doesn't mean you can what? Label them with a negative label. I would understand this. Be careful of this. Moving forward. Hadiths regarding lahu al-hadith, and I believe we've run out of time. We're going to stop here. What's important is, brothers and sisters, in closing, like all of these different talks and these different conferences, the speakers, the scholars, the orators, the educators, their job is to enlighten you, to waken you up, to remind you, and to place you in the direction of searching for the rest of the truth yourself. Everything is not going to be given to you in 40 minutes. Everything is not going to be given to you in a weekend. You have to do some effort. You have to put forth some energy to research and to find. After you've been taught the proper way of looking, the proper way of thinking, and the proper way of listening and watching. What's important is music, singing, dancing, idle speech is an extremely important issue, and it's extremely dangerous and extremely powerful, and it's something that touches most of us, if not all of us, on a daily basis. So with that being said, we cannot go head first to any issue until we see what Allah and His Messenger has said. And until we see the understanding and interpretation of the words of Allah and His Messenger to those who knew and understood those words better than anyone else. And they were the people who lived with them. They were the people who lived with the Prophet ﷺ, who traveled with the Prophet ﷺ, etc. We've run out of time. Jazakumullahu khairan. Sallallahu sallam.